7 years ago, I presented to you guys my top 25 albums of all time. And I felt that with the decade ending, and with this journey of Cover Killer Nation also coming to a conclusion, it was fitting to do it again and to expand it to a top 50 to see how things perhaps have changed over those past 7 years. Now there's a couple things to keep in mind whenever you watch this list. For one, an album to be eligible needs to have at least 5 years spread since its release, which means that albums from 2014 are able to be on this list, but anything from 2015 onward to present cannot. It's almost like the Hall of Fame. You have to have an eligibility period. Second of all, this is something where I tried to avoid putting artists on multiple times and failed miserably. There are just a couple of albums that I really love that much from some artists, so sorry. This is a subjective list also, number 3, so this is 100% mine, as opposed to doing anything analytical or examining scores or things like that. So if you don't see your favorite album on here, please don't get mad, but do tell me what your maybe top 10 or 25 albums of all time are in the comments box below. And finally, I want to shoot through this pretty quick. I don't want it to be too long of a video for you guys. If it's under 30 minutes, that'd be awesome. So I'm going to talk pretty quick, but you can see a full list thanks to a link that is in the description box. Thank you guys so much for everything, and for now, my name is Cover Killer Nation, and these are my top 50 albums of all time. Number 50 is Alice in Chains with The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here, a recent release with William Duvall that showcased that Alice still had the ability to write poignant music. It's almost like this era's Dirt. Number 49 is Watain with Lawless Darkness, a true black metal masterpiece here in the 2010s that displayed that this group, whenever they did a little bit of experimenting and went outside of the box, is able to craft absolute magic. Number 48 is Elland with Winds Devouring Man. Avant-garde, experimentation, chamber music. Oh my god, is this album luscious. What a terrific, terrific early 2000s product. Number 47 is Ulver with themes from William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Yeah, it's a strange pick, but I love this album. They take and basically have the words of the short story be the lyrics of this massive double album project. It is experimentative, it is different, it showed that Oliver was never going to play by the rules ever again. Number 46 is Redemption with Snowfall on Judgment Day, the first ever album of the year back in 2009. The channel was still called Cover Killer, and this progressive masterpiece was given to us. Absolutely glorious disc. Number 45 is Mastodon with Crack the Sky, their progressive masterpiece. I know, I say the word progressive a lot because it's there, it's present. This is expansive, this has longer tracks, it has some of their best and finest songwriting as well as one of their best and most catchy songs, Oblivion. Number 44 is Eson with After. Hard pick to choose between this and an album that's recent such as Arctis that actually wouldn't count. But this is an awesome disc. I love this. It still hasn't left my car for years and years and years. I've played this to death and I keep coming back for more. Eson is an amazing side project, perhaps one of the best side projects that we've ever gotten, or solo projects that we've ever gotten out of heavy metal. Number 43 is In Flames with Horacle. The master and commander of In Flames is this great album that is able to take everything from the Jester Race and show where the band was eventually going to be heading with albums such as Colony and Clayman. Number 42 is Dark Fortress with Elam. Speaking of albums that I've spun to death, wasn't high up on the album of the year list, but is definitely high up in my heart considering I still play this dark black metal masterwork even to this day. And their follow-ups have only shown that this direction was a good decision. Number 41 is Thought Industry with Shortwave on a Cold Day. Wow, this is an interesting one to talk about. These guys are an experimental group that went progressive on this album and almost more of a rock direction with this disc. And it shows with tight songwriting, fantastical lyricism, and just a beautiful landscape. This is, in my opinion, their little masterpiece that came right before the band dissolved. Number 40 is Enslaved with Axima Ethica Odine, 2010's album of the year, and maybe not necessarily the best Enslaved album, but the one that I personally just love to death. It was between this and Below the Lights, actually, for me, because both of those albums have meant an incredible amount to me. Number 39 is Pink Floyd with Animals. My favorite Pink Floyd album, the one that is, again, sort of the unsung hero of the 1970s material. These long tracks have some of Pink's best material and just absolutely delivers in every sense of the word. For Every Wish You Were Here and Dark Side of the Moon that I hear, I counter with Animals because this album is glory. Number 38 is Testament with The Ritual. I know it's their sellout disc. I love their sellout disc. This disc is amazing. It's the first Testament album I ever had, not to mention songs such as Return to Serenity, the title track, as well as Electric Crown, just absolutely continue to pump me up to this day. Either that or put me in a very reflective or somewhat down mood. Return to Serenity is just an amazing amazing song by itself. You should scope that out if you scope anything out from this album. Number 37 is Stone Temple Pilots with number 4. Most thought it would probably be Core, but I go with number 4 because this has a very personal edge to it. Not to mention it has Atlanta, which I think is maybe their best song. This is certainly one where Scott Weiland talks a lot about heroin in a lot of different metaphoric ways, but it is just masterful in the way it glides through its track listing. Number 36 is Wolverine with the Window Purpose. What an amazing album this is. This is one that shows a band that hasn't fully embraced the prog cup, but has some death metal vocals within. It tells one hell of a story, and my lord is the music on this absolutely luscious. If you don't believe me, listen to Leaving Yesterday, listen to His Cold Touch, and Call Me in the Morning. Number 35 is Soundgarden with Super Unknown. It was kind of a toss-up between this and Bad Motorfinger, but after listening to both of them, I was able to make a judgment. I love Chris Cornell's vocals. I love his overall delivery, and I love this band's, they are an alternative group that felt like they were drawing on influence from everything. It was absolutely amazing. This was a big-time breakout album, has singles aplenty. I can't say enough about this. I miss Chris Cornell every single day. Number 34 is Queensryche with Operation Mindcrime, and this album is the original concept album to end all concept albums that was left sort of ambiguous. You had to sort of wonder what happened, and the music that's within it is very, very well crafted. It showed how a concept album could be done track to track. It wasn't one that needed to use loose theme, instead told a great story. This is a terrific album no matter what happened to the band after it. Number 33 is Carcass with Surgical Steel. I know it's not Heartwork, but this album I felt superseded it. It was an absolute masterpiece. Not to mention, it came nearly 20 years after their last album. So for a band to return and do this is not something that at that point we had really seen very often. Of course, we just saw it here in 2019, and it nearly carried that band to the same result of Album of the Year. But Surgical Steel showed that Carcass had not missed a step, and in fact had learned a couple of new tricks while they were away. Number 32 is Pain of Salvation with The Perfect Element. Another just terrific conceptual piece, and this is one that set up a sort of disappointing second part that we got later on in the 2000s, but this disc is just magic. This is a band that was still young and hungry and crafted a little masterpiece that also helped to deliver, once again, a secondary masterpiece a couple years later with Remedy Lane. Number 31 is Agalloch with Ashes Against the Grain. I know this feels like heresy, but this is the disc that is, I think out of the two big main Agalloch albums, is just a little bit underneath. Mostly because I spin the other one a lot more, spin it in its entirety. It's one of those discs where I have to hear it all. With Ashes Against the Grain, I get very hooked and sentimental toward specific songs, and as a result of that, I don't necessarily always get to that as a complete effort. But it's still an amazing, magical album from a band that was on the high of their life whenever it came to songwriting. Just glorious work. I know that a lot of you have discovered Agalloch because of me. If you have not heard this name prior, then scope it out tonight. And let that be the last thing I give to you. Number 30 is Porcupine Tree with Voyage 34. This is the anti-album, I guess. This is all 100% based around krautrock, of progressive music, of jam, and has a really cool lasting sort of feel to it. I just dig this album for everything that it is. The improv is fantastic. The story is very trippy. It's a relaxing listen that just really takes you on just a solid journey or a voyage. Number 29 is Creator with Phantom Antichrist, the first 100 out of 100 that the channel ever got, and still a thrash album that feels like it is bigger than itself. It is incredible. I love going back to this disc and remembering the feeling that I had when I heard it for the first time. It's still present in there, even though I know what's coming. Number 28 is Metallica with Ride the Lightning, not Master of Puppets. I love Master of Puppets, but didn't make the list. Ride the Lightning, though, has always been the album that I've loved and had the passionate love affair for because it is different. It has some different ideas on its second half, and whenever we get the traditional thrash, we get some of Metallica's best. This is a terrific album that showed a young band that was already starting to mature within leaps and bounds. They would take an even bigger step with Master of Puppets, but Ride the Lightning is the one that just for me is the sentimental favorite. I love it. Number 27 is Death with the Sound of Perseverance. Oh my gosh, if you want to go out, this is the way that you go out. Now, of course, there was a Control Denied album after this, but Chuck's swan song with his original project, Death, is a progressive death metal masterpiece. And this was one that showed the full circle conclusion of Death's real evolution as a group and their maturity. This is powerful stuff. From philosophical lyrics to mind-bending guitar solos, the composition is glorious. Number 26 is Mother Love Bone with Apple. Their one and only album, the Andy Wood legacy, continues. The minute that I heard this album, I was absolutely hooked. And it's just a shame that this is the only thing that we ever got from this grunge icon that is largely forgotten about. If you like Temple of a Dog or even know that band's name, it is directly a result of Mother Love Bone, so you should go and check them out. Number 25 is Yes with Close to the Edge. My God, just the title track alone on this is magnificent. This is prog rock from the 70s at its best. It is an incredible album, a terrific experience. It mind bends. It's amazing. I would highly recommend this if you're trying to get into prog rock and want to look into its history. It's an important thing to do, and this is the best of the best. Number 24 is Nia Bliviscaris with Citadel, the album of the 2010s. There's a good chance that that is true, and it's barely eligible to be on this list, and I'm glad that it is. This is just such a fun album to listen to, not to mention it is a powerful album to listen to. It's one that combines all the best elements of progressive death metal. It also encompasses a little bit of other styles of extreme metal, and this band has just been on a musical high ever since they started, and Citadel might be impossible to touch. Number 23 is Communic with Waves of Visual Decay. There's a lot of Nevermore that's in here, only Nevermore gone even more prog and with more deliberate movement. And my gosh, 2005's Conspiracy of Mind was my album of the year. This was an even better album and didn't get album of the year. It was like number 3 or something like that. I'd have to look back. This is just incredible stuff. Not to mention the vocals are absolutely incredible. The mood is large. Number 22 is Push Monkey with their self-titled album Push Monkey. I have loved this album for more than 20 years. This is alternative rock at its best. It is absolutely criminal that this band did not become huge because of this album. If you've never heard this and you like alternative music at all, especially from the late 90s, listen to it. Don't wait. Number 21 is Between the Buried and Me with Colors. Holy cracker barrel. This was an insane album. We knew that Between the Buried and Me had a lot of tools at their disposal, but they used all of them and even invented a couple new tools for this album. It is the pinnacle of late 2000s heavy metal, and Between the Buried and Me has been chasing this dragon ever since, despite the fact some said that they accomplished it with The Great Misdirect. This is the one that for me is untouchable. Number 20 is Edge of Sanity with Crimson, the original long song, one song album that is still the prototype for what progressive death metal was set to become. This showed that there could be no rules, that the rules meant nothing, and that you could create something that was lengthy, that still had lasting power. This is an album that 25 years later is still just as amazing as the first time you listened to it, whether that was whenever it was released or it was any other time in between. Absolutely incredible. Dan Swano is a genius. Number 19 is Arcturus with the Sham Mirrors. Now, some might want a different album for this pick, but my Christ, this is craziness. For a side project, this is insanity. It bends time, it bends space, and Arcturus continuously shows that this sort of cosmic array of space and, black metal or death metal or just, I don't even know what you want to call this. It's absolutely incredible. They are sonic pioneers. They are wayward travelers. The people that are involved are among the most influential whenever it comes to taking extreme metal into a brand new stratosphere. Number 18 is Dissection with Storm of the Light's Bane. One of the black metal albums that to me is just the clarion call for what excellence is all about within the genre. You don't see Immortal on this list. You don't see Burzum on this list. You don't see, Mayhem on this list. But you do see this because it took black metal and sort of decided to expand it a little bit more and gave it just really an aggressive edge. I could just have easily have thrown Reign Chaos on here, which would have been really unpopular, but goddamn is that album just amazing too. Love this album, love this group. It's a shame that they're no longer with us, but hey, beliefs are beliefs. Number 17 is Overkill with The Years of Decay. Wow! Man, you want to talk about the sort of the red-haired stepchild in their early discography. This took everything from the thrash metal lessons of old and sort of turned it on its head. Long songs that decided to explore a lot and really has a mood and a feel that is completely unique to their discography, and it is addicting. It is hard to get away from this album. I love it. Number 16 is Nevermore with Dreaming Neon Black. God, do we miss you, Worrell. And this album was their most personal. If you don't believe me, look up anything that has to do with the story behind this disc and things that were happening in Worrell's life around the time of it. Oh, God. This is crushing. This is absolutely crushing. Not to mention the music. It seems like whenever people are at their worst, the music is at their best. And it's a real shame that that duality tends to be present at all times. Awesome album. I can't recommend it enough. Rest in peace, Worrell Dane. Number 15 is Dream Theater with Metropolis 2. This is part 2 of the concept album to end all concept albums. This is an absolute masterpiece. It tells a fantastic story. It's to the point where, I love this album to the point where I wrote a sequel to it. And if you want to see that, I'm not sure how we're going to do that, because it's just sort of a plot framework. You probably know this album by now. If you don't and you haven't listened to it yet, do it. Just do it. If you're taking notes, just next to this one, just put listen to now. Number 14 is Judas Priest with Painkiller. He is the painkiller. This is their best album, to the point where Firepower was getting comparisons to it because of its setup, the way in which it flowed, and the way the songs operated. And whenever you have an album that ends up being sort of the genesis or the framework for a future release, you know that you have a classic on your hands. And this was a classic. This is the last from the Halford era, and it's, oh my God. You should know this album, and if you don't, you're a very, very shameful person. Number 13 is Iron Maiden with Brave New World. Another sentimental pick. This is the comeback album with Bruce Dickinson from the early 2000s. I share this album with one of my best friends in the entire world, despite the fact that we really don't talk much anymore. It is still the album that unifies us and bonds us. I love you, brother. Number 12 is Cynic with Focus. Talk about jazz and blending things and just sort of taking the rule book and saying that it doesn't matter. This is exactly what Cynic was able to accomplish with this album, and did so masterfully. I love that this album decided to incorporate jazz into death metal to show that it didn't have to always be one way. And this was from a scene that was starting to slowly do that alongside bands such as Death and Atheist. And as a result, we now know that death metal and extreme metal in general is an expansive subgenre of heavy metal music that is able to incorporate all blocks and walks of life in order to give it its overall feel that is truly one of a kind. Speaking of that, number 11 is Emperor with Prometheus, the Discipline of Fire and Demise. This did that with black metal. And despite the fact that it doesn't seem to be maybe as expansive as Cynic's focus was, or perhaps as influential, it was very important in showcasing that black metal was not one that had to be conformed to its basic ideals. It was instead one that was able to expand out further and express itself in more progressive and more lofty ways. You could almost say that this was the debut of progressive black metal, though that would probably be a bit inaccurate. I'm sure that there have been groups that were already tinkering with the project beforehand. This is just a great album. It is the one that, for me, beats out the heavy hitter classics that are always talked about, such as Anthems to the Vulcan at Dusk, either that or 9 Equilibrium. This is awesome, or, In the Nightshade Eclipse, of course. I don't want to forget that. Someone will freaking crucify me for that. But this is just an amazing disc, and we are seeing and bearing the fruits of what this group has been able to accomplish with groups such as Green Carnation, and then, of course, with Eson. Number 10 is Opeth with Blackwater Park. You probably wondered when this was going to be on here. The sentimental favorite among Opeth fans is this one right here, and it is an absolute trip. So the first Opeth album that I ever got, and one that I will never ever forget. It launched an obsession that has not ceased in 20 plus years. It is an amazing release that has so many different dimensions and layers to it. The songwriting is a band at their peak, and really a group that was able to do no wrong at this point. This was, for a lot of people, their initiation. For a lot of people, this was the way in which they got into the band, and it has launched a love affair that has also felt like their heart has been stolen at times whenever you take a listen to the comments by folks. But just the title track alone is worth the experience. My Lord, what an expansive, amazing disc. It is number 10. Number 9 is Celtic Frost with Monotheist. This might be the darkest album that I've ever heard. And I know that there's black metal out there. I know that there's just crushing stuff. I know that, and Necroth exists, for example. Either that or some of the others that are in the suicidal, black metal department or suicidal doom metal. Or this is crushing. This is destructive. This is pure rage and anger that instead of being channeled in the form of thrash metal is channeled through dark metal that utilizes the brooding atmosphere that was aided by Pythagorean from hypocrisy in order to build just an absolute abyss. I know it was probably done at the Abyss, Pete's recording studio, but that's not really the point here. This feels like you are literally in your own tomb or your own crypt, and you are struggling to find your way out, or you are struggling to find yourself, or you are struggling against some of the things that enrage you. It's just an emotionally crushing disc, and one that feels really good to listen to. Whenever you finish this disc, you feel changed every single time. Number 8 is Porcupine Tree with Fear of a Blank Planet. Whenever you talk about modern culture, there's a very good chance that if you hit it on the nose, you're going to have an amazing response. And this album hit it absolutely on the nose. One of the longest songs in their discography is present on this disc, and the songs that were able to sort of be the bookends to it are just absolutely absurd. It is insanely great progressive rock / progressive metal. It is easily Porcupine Tree's finest hour. It was a hard decision because The Sky Moves Sideways gives me a little musical chubby, but this album is just glorious. Number 7 is Iron Maiden with Seventh Son of the Seventh Son. There's a lot of sevens in there. Tool would be proud. This is the album that, again, I tend to like albums that are a little bit like Red-Haired Stepchilds or sort of weird little ideas. So I don't go with Number of the Beast. I don't go with Peace of Mind. I go with this because it is Iron Maiden at their most expansive. It's Iron Maiden deciding to do something a little bit different at the tail end of their 1980s run. It still fits the construct very well, but some of these tracks are a little bit longer. They really go into some of the things that we see a little bit more on modern Iron Maiden. And so it was almost a heralding cry of where this band was eventually going to head to. We, of course, didn't get there right away with albums such as Fear of the Dark and No Prayer for the Dying. But this is an amazing album with one of the best album covers of all time. This is Iron Maiden. I love it. Number 6 is Death with Symbolic. For everything the Sound of Perseverance was able to do, Symbolic was able to do so and contain itself a little bit better. And this is one that still had the guise of more of a straightforward death metal album with progressive links that were sort of just sprinkled in, and then the Sound of Perseverance would make it a lot more prominent. I love this album considering it is so pure and so fantastic, and there are so many memorable tracks from Crystal Mountain to the title track itself. Awesome stuff. God, play this album today if you have the opportunity. Number 5 is Opeth with Still Life. Yes, I am a Still Life guy, not a Blackwater Park guy. That's my number 1. That is my top of the mountain. This album is absolutely a spectacle. It is immortal. It is incredible. It basically is the setup for Blackwater Park. It was showing where this band was going, and did so even better than Blackwater Park because the songs, some of the parts in these tracks are absolutely instantly recognizable. For all that people gush about the title track of Blackwater Park, you gush about almost every track on Still Life. There's a reason why you do that. There's a reason why that happens, because each of these songs has something that makes them special and unique. From The Moor to Godhead's Lament to Moonlapse Vertigo to Face of Melinda, I could go on and on and on about this disc. Just know that it's my number 1 Opeth album of all time, and it's my number 5 album of all time. Number 4 is Alice in Chains with Dirt. This is probably the most real album that I've ever heard in my life. This is one that showed Lane Staley in an absolute state of mind that was probably not healthy. And it was honest. This was the most honest album probably that I have ever heard. It is incredible. This is grunge that is not really grunge, because grunge at times is a bit more whimsical. This is one that is dark, it is brooding, it is depressing, it is crushing, it delivers in every step of the way. You listen to a song such as Junkhead and you understand Lane's plight. You listen to a track such as Wood and it's almost like questioning death. You listen to tracks such as Angry Chair and you hear about how past sometimes affects the future or the present. It is phenomenal. I can't recommend this album enough. I understand why folks miss Lane. I miss Lane, and it's been however many years, 17? How long has it been? It's been way too long. We miss that voice, but this was almost telling us that his time was short. And because of that, it's number 4 all time. Number 3 is Megadeth with Rust in Peace. This was number 1 on the prior list, but this is one that needed to be revised because a couple of albums have since superseded it. This is the perfect thrash metal album. That's all that you really need to know. This is the perfect thrash metal album. This has the perfect blend of great songwriting, amazing solos from Marty Friedman and Dave Mustaine, and it has a short length. It is not one that is going to overstay its welcome. It's easy to go back to and listen to over and over again. You can get lost in this album. You can listen to it 5 times in a day and not even realize it. And the songs individually are easy to go back and just jam to. I love this disc. It is absolutely wonderful. It's, I'm sorry to have it no longer be my number 1 of all time. Things change, but it is still right up there in the top 3. It is the bronze medalist for good reason. The silver medalist, though, number 2 is Modeling of the Well with Bath and Leaving Your Body Map. Modeling of the Well has become an absolute channel of inspiration for me over the past number of years. And these 2 albums were high up on the list to begin with. But it gets its way to number 2 simply because of how these songs never get old. These albums never get old. I had these in my car in October and November, and it included My Fruit Psycho Bells, a Sea Combustible, their first album too. This is just a band that for me never gets old. They're the group that really introduced me headlong into avant-garde music and also showed that the rules were meant to be broken and that things were meant to be a certain way and things were meant to be broken a certain way. Because there's still some conventional ideas in here, but most of it is musical exploration, and the whole story behind this album is trying to do some lucid dreaming and write a song based around that idea. And there's a huge, massive concept, a huge secret that is involved within these 2 albums that still hasn't been solved, and these albums came out 19 years ago. Absolutely incredible from front to back. Cannot recommend this band enough times. If you do one thing for me, one thing upon my departure, listen to Modeling of the Well, or listen to K.O. Dot. That's Toby Driver's other project, and the more modern project. They just had an album that was on the top 50 albums of the year list in Blasphemy. Listen to these albums. They are incredible. They are going to seem different, but that's because they are different, and that's the point. That brings us to number 1, the gold medal, the new number 1, and that's The Mantle by Agalloch. This should come as no surprise. I love this album from front to back, from back to front, side to side. There are times throughout each year, and really each season, where I have to listen to this album in its completion. I have listened to this album from front to back to completion so many times that it is impossible to keep up. And it is something that I think was not clear whenever I made this list earlier this decade, but now is absolutely crystal clear. This is apt in winter. This is apt for driving. This is apt for spring melt. This is apt for whenever you're feeling down. This is apt for when you're feeling up. This album has the ability to convey mood and convey just fantastic theme no matter what. Even as a man who is a non-theist, the line, "If this grand panorama before me is what you call God, then God is not dead," is still my all-time, I would say, favorite musician or song quote that I use it constantly. I love it. This album has inspired me. This album has continued to drive me into more unexplored territory with music. And this album is from a band that you all have stated is the group that I have introduced you to the most. And I'm appreciative of that. I'm glad that so many of you have been able to find this album and have heard this album. If you are not among those, if you are not someone who has ever heard this album, I implore you to listen to it. But do so on your own terms whenever you have an hour or so to kill. Whenever you can be all alone and that you can soak this album in for the masterpiece that it truly is. That's why it's my number 1. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'm just going to beat 30 minutes. Thank you so much for all the support throughout the years. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. one final time, but this has been a magical ride that is beyond compare. Please give me your list of your favorite albums of all time in the comments box below. My name is CoverKillerNation. Thanks again. I'll talk to you tomorrow.